Newsroom. 10 months ago, New York authorities cut short the political ambitions of France's leading contender at the time for president. Dominique Strauss-Kahn, despite being yanked off a plane in handcuffs, eventually cleared of sex assault charges. But it's not over. This Wednesday, his lawyers back in court for the civil suit lodged by his alleged victim, hotel maid Nafissatou Diallo. So far, fresh revelations coming less out of the Bronx this time and more from the French northern city of Lille, where the former boss of the IMF was placed under formal investigation Monday evening for involvement in a prostitution ring, one that includes an ambitious local businessman and a police boss there. His lawyers deny all. They're even suing after the leaking of testimony where prostitutes allege that he was the star attraction to entice clients to come to orgies. Now, beyond the graphic, some might argue lurid details of this new case, there's the timing of the latest revelations. They happen to be during the homestretch of France's presidential election campaign. The case itself may have little to do with politics, but what's been the impact of Strauss-Kahn's fall from grace on France as a whole? We're going to be looking at it today in the France 24 debate, DSK and the French. And with us to talk about it, journalist Aude Baron of Le Plus, the interactive website of Le Nouvel Observateur. Welcome back, Aude.
Hello.
Welcome back as well to Anne Bagamuri of the International Herald Tribune. Attorney Eric Lissan, thank you for being with us. And we have another counselor with us, Ron Sofer, whose private practice is based here in the French capital. The France 24 debate, where you can always join the conversation on Facebook and on Twitter, where our handle is @FrancoisF24. I guess, Eric Lissan, I'll begin with you because a lot of people in this country don't quite understand all of this. He was cleared on criminal charges. Now there's a civil case.
Exactly. The civil case has nothing to do with the criminal case. It's brought by a private party seeking monetary damages. The state is not involved. The sanction can only be monetary damages or some other type of civil relief, but it cannot involve the traditional sanction for a criminal case that means jail.
But won't the case be weakened by the fact that the criminal charges were dropped?
It could be if the judge allows evidence in attacking the credibility of the primary witness against him, and certainly there is a lot of that evidence that was uncovered in the criminal case, then that will make the case tougher. But remember, the standards of proof are much different. To convict in a criminal case is the highest standard under American law, beyond a reasonable doubt. To prevail in a civil case is a much lower standard, beyond a preponderance of the evidence, which means simply more likely than not. So it's easier to win a civil case, and the rules of procedure and the rules of evidence are different.
Eric Lissan, Ron Sofer, the defense attorneys for Dominique Strauss-Kahn say they're going to plead diplomatic immunity. Their client was the head of the International Monetary Fund when all this transpired. How strong is that argument?
I think it's a very compelling argument. There is a treaty from 1947 which gives the heads, the Secretary General, the head of international organizations, full diplomatic immunity under the Vienna Treaty.
Well, then why was he in jail then?
There is an issue that the United States is not a signatory of this treaty, but they make a compelling argument that this treaty has become customary international law and therefore part of federal law. Now, how far this goes, even if the judge accepts this argument and dismisses the case, it is a question of whether they can, now that he has that no longer benefits from this procedural immunity, whether they can restart the case, even if they're successful. Now, they're asking in their motion papers for dismissal with prejudice, which means that she would not be able to restart. But if the judge does not accept that and dismisses it without prejudice, because he no longer benefits from this immunity, then she might be able to restart. So how far this goes, even if he's successful, is a very complex legal matter.
And what's your prediction? Will the case be thrown out?
I think they make a very good case. Will the judge throw it out? I don't know, but it's a compelling argument.
Eric Lissan? Your prediction?
I will eat my hat if this motion is granted and upheld on appeal all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. There is no precedent under U.S. law for accepting an unsigned treaty as a customary norm of international law in the United States. They might be able to bamboozle the trial judge. They will certainly be able to delay the trial if they win at the trial level. But ultimately, as this goes through the appellate process, if the other side wants to take it that far, the case of immunity will be resolved against Mr. Strauss-Kahn. This treaty was never ratified by the United States.
All right, and one of the beauties of the U.S. system is that the presiding judge often grants interviews before the trial and even gives his own prediction as to the outcome.
When one discusses the quote Bronx juror, close quote, or Bronx jury more accurately, they typically are referring to jurors which come from a poorer community, and who are typically more generous in the verdicts which they render in civil cases.
All right, so it won't be a sympathetic audience. Aude Baron, what's your reaction when you see the civil suit, the fact that the judge is here predicting that it's going to be tough for Strauss-Kahn's lawyers to sway a jury that may be sympathetic to Nafissatou Diallo, an immigrant worker from a humble background?
Well, from France, we just have a very simple impression. It's like a Hollywood movie. You know, you just had a politician who was predicted to be president, and then he falls down, and it's astonishing. And after the trials, you just have the impression that it will never end. In France, it's much more. It looks simpler. Maybe you just tell me if I'm wrong. So, see, from the audience, we just have the impression to look at, a show, and you're waiting for the end, not knowing what's going to happen tomorrow, because you never know what's going to happen, because you always have surprises. When the scandal of Nafissatou Diallo arrived on the public scene, who could have expected that on Lille you would have another scandal? So, people are just now expecting.
And it's not just those two scandals, is it, Anne Bagamarie?
No, there's also, there have been a few other things in his past which have been resolved, if that's what you're referring to. The affair that he had with a colleague at the International Monetary Fund was investigated by the fund itself. He was exonerated from any undue pressure placed on his partner, but I believe he was reprimanded for the behavior. However, he really didn't suffer any consequences there. There was also the suit that was brought against him by the young writer Tristan Banon here in France. I believe she sued him for sexual assault, and he didn't face those charges because the judge ruled that they had happened too long ago. The incident had happened too long ago. He's either the luckiest man on the planet, or he has the best lawyers on the planet, or both, because this is someone who has faced a bullet 4 times in the last 2 years, year and a half, and 3 years if you count the IMF, and come out of it. I don't think he's come out of it unscathed, but he certainly has. There's certainly enough that's been going on in his life. I mean, it's a good thing he's not running for president in the United States. One of these would have been enough to knock him out of the box. The fact that his political ambitions in France survived even a couple of these brushes with infame is an extraordinary thing to see.
Ron Sofer, those political ambitions are dead now, it seems. And has his luck run out?
Well, I'm not sure that one can say that he's lucky considering what's happening to him and all that he's gone through over the last 6 months. It would be impossible to imagine for anyone. He has a very, very serious problem now because he is, if the judge does not accept diplomatic immunity, then he would face the idea of being deposed under oath for days and days and possibly asked questions in the United States about the Lille matter. And then the question would be whether the judge would protect him from answering questions that might actually jeopardize or incriminate him in France.
That's an important point. Eric Lisan, he's not going to be present. He isn't present for the initial hearing. Is he going to have to show his face in the Bronx soon?
Well, as Mr. Sofer is explaining, if the case goes forward to what's called the discovery phase, That is, if the judge allows it to go forward right now and denies this motion to dismiss on the grounds of immunity, then the parties are allowed under American law to take each other's depositions, to present interrogatories, those are written questions submitted under oath, and even to interview other witnesses. So in that case, Mr. Strauss-Kahn would face questioning from the adverse party, and under American law, he could be questioned about a wide variety of subjects. It's not unlike the President Bill Clinton deposition in the famous Paula Jones case that was actually litigated while he was president of the United States, but dating to his tenure as governor of Arkansas. He had to submit to all kinds of questions. One of those questions was about Monica Lewinsky, an altogether different subject than Paula Jones. This happens under the wide-ranging latitude given to adverse parties in American civil discovery.
So you find yourself in a situation where there could be this endless amount of litigation. And what we see now, again, with this new case, relatively new, in the north of France, where there are claims that he's involved in a prostitution ring. Strauss-Kahn says he's never denied the fact that he has a lively personal life, but he's going to have to be perhaps going back and forth now.
Well, when I said that I thought he was a lucky man, he's still free. He still has a semblance of his life. There are people who would have faced some of these charges and be in jail now, or they would have emptied their personal reserves to pay fines. Now, that may still happen, although his personal reserves are quite substantial. It's absolutely true that now, American civil litigation can drag on and on and on, and that's in a way what Aude is referring to when she talks about it being a movie, that it never seems to end. There's always some other dramatic chapter that can happen. And now in Lille, I must admit, I'll defer to the attorneys on the panel. I'm not sure what the responsibility will be for him to appear in Lille personally to defend his name or to answer questions. But if there's any of that in the French trial, this is his life from now on.
Aude Baron, Dominique Strauss-Kahn has been a household name in France for decades. He was the finance minister. He was a stalwart of the French Socialist Party. Is this the same man that do your colleagues and friends recognize this as the same man?
Well, obviously you have a change, and there is a before and an after. And when you see today this affair, of course it's quite impressive, but not as impressive as this summer, because from now on Dominique Strauss-Kahn is not considered as a politician anymore, because he, on the politically in France, I would say he's nothing anymore. He doesn't have any power anymore, and we know he won't come back. For him, it's just impossible. And the presidential election is running, so he's just out of the game. And people, I think it's like when someone, when you have to forget someone, when you've been in love with someone. And because when you see the presidential election, it's what's very interesting is that it changed everything, because before you had Dominique Strauss-Kahn and Sarkozy, which are two very strong personalities, and people were voting for. Whereas now you have Sarkozy and Hollande, and people, they don't really know for who they're going to vote. So you will vote against someone. So they miss not Dominique Strauss-Kahn, but they miss the stake, and they miss, the atmosphere that was when he was here. And I just would like to come back on the lucky or unlucky, and maybe we can say, we don't know, but maybe Dominique Strauss-Kahn had planned something, or had prepared himself at least, because just before May 15th, and we know he had lunch with some journalists, with some happy few, we can say.
End of April of last year.
And he told them that he feared that he was very aware of his defaults, and he quoted his sexuality. So maybe we can guess he knew that if he was going to run for the presidential election, he would be attacked on Tristan Banon affair and maybe on Lille, because he knew that the UMP, so his enemies, they had a file against him.
And here's how Strauss-Kahn's lawyer summed up those charges after he was officially placed under investigation on Monday evening.
In fact, he's being blamed for his lustful behavior, his libertine behavior. This is shocking. This is something that is affecting Dominique Strauss-Kahn. We're not just talking about anyone here. He is being deliberately targeted.
Haute Baron, he's being deliberately targeted. Is there a plot against Dominique Strauss-Kahn?
It was a theory, this summer. In May 2011, people were so shocked that during a few days, I would say during a week, people, it's not like they couldn't, it's that they didn't want to believe that such a thing had happened. So you had many theories running that it was, a plot from the UMP and Sarkozy, or it was a plot from, them, from the state, and in that case, you don't know who you can target, but there was, an enemy. And it was very interesting because a week after it happened, and even the journalists, they started, to think about it and say, maybe it really happened. Maybe it's not so unrealistic. It's amazing, but from now on, the plot theory, no one believes it anymore because you had Tristan Banon, because you had Lille. So you just had to face the reality. And maybe that this man really has a problem with his sexuality. He's kind of slave of his sexuality.
Ron Sofer, do you agree?
I think that it seems from we don't have access to the case of the judges in Lille, but it does seem very strange to accuse him of being part of a prostitution ring as opposed to being a user. For a person who doesn't have access to the case, it does seem like it's going a bit too far. But to say that he's being targeted, I don't think so. This is the way criminal investigations go. He's put under examination for the most serious crime, and then we'll see what happens if he's indicted or not. One has to explain that this does not mean that he has been indicted. He's been put under investigation. He's like the target of an investigation, and this opens the possibility to put him under certain restrictions. But it doesn't mean that he's been indicted. There's also the possibility that the Court of Appeals will decide that there was no cause to put him under investigation for such a serious crime. So we haven't seen the end of this yet, and he might actually end up being successful on that too.
All right. He may live to see another day. When we come back in the France 24 debate, we're going to be looking at, again, how this is impacting France, which is in the home stretch of a presidential election campaign. Have the French changed these past 10 months as a result of these cases?